When asked about the integration of the University of Alabama, few students can name pivotal individuals such as Autherine Lucy and Vivian Malone. Even fewer could describe to any specific length the extent of the violence and hostility faced by courageous integrationists. I decided to investigate why it was that this history has little relevance, aside from the occasional mention in a lecture, in the lives of current University of Alabama students. In order to gain insight into the media coverage of Autherine Lucy's integration attempts, I visited the W.S. Hoole Special Collections Library on campus. After asking the Special Collections attendants about possible documents concerning the role of the local black churches in integration efforts at UA, I was told that no such documents existed in their collection. Not too surprised, I decided to look at what was reported of the initial integration efforts of Autherine Lucy. As I perused through the 1956 publications of the Tuscaloosa News, I began to get a sense of how white Alabamians felt about the situation. From coverage of developments in Lucy's case to letters to the editors, the Tuscaloosa News articles revealed a complex history from varied perspectives. In one article, I read about a small group of about 500 UA students who petitioned to have Lucy reinstated at the capstone. On the other hand, I encountered a letter to the editor from a J.S. Jones in Utah, Alabama. Mr. Jones' letter states, "We ignorant, lazy white people are still in the South, where we intend to stay. Since we have Negroes to do our thinking and our work for us, we would be foolish to leave. We respect all mankind, regardless of creed, race, or color, but in their place, and that is not in our schools." In the same article, a few columns over, was a rather intriguing letter from a Mrs. J.V. Welch from Samantha, Alabama, asking what the views of the African American community were. Mrs. Welch asks, "Don't you think it would be nice if some of the Negroes would write and give views on segregation? I don't believe there are very many Negroes that want to do away with segregation any more than we do." As I looked over the Tuscaloosa News and Crimson White publications during February 1956, I distinctly noticed the issue that Mrs. Welch drew stark attention to: the fact that the voice of the black community was not present. In order to explore a story untold, I contacted Dr. Joseph Scrivner, who serves as the installed pastor of Brown Memorial Presbyterian Church, in order to hear how the church community supported Lucy's integration efforts.
First Presbyterian Church in Tuscaloosa started the Tuscaloosa Institute, I believe, when it started what became Stillman College in 1876. And shortly after that, they started what was Bethel Presbyterian Church, which was a small congregation for African Americans. So they started what became Stillman College for African American ministers, and a natural outgrowth of that was to start a church for African Americans. So the place that became Stillman was started in 1876. The church that became Brown Memorial, but it was originally Bethel, was started in 1880. Brown Memorial had a longtime pastor in Reverend Charles Williams. He was the pastor from 1948 until 1977. He was pastor here during the 60s, during integration. A lot of the efforts for integration began at Stillman College among the faculty and students, and Stillman College would have chapel here at the church. And so there was an effort to have rallies here for protests, but I think the leadership at Brown Memorial, the pastor and the leadership body called the session, they were hesitant to have rallies here because they were afraid of retaliation, they were afraid of violence, they were afraid of people losing their jobs or being stigmatized or harassed if Brown Memorial became a place for rallies. As I understand it, Stillman would be a place where African American students trying to integrate the University of Alabama, Stillman was a place they could come and find fellowship and support. Many of the students were active and they marched, for instance, on Bloody Tuesday, that day in 1964. So they were active, and the faculty members at Stillman were also agitating, you might say, for protests. And so the community was a place where people were arguing that something should be done, that the college and the church, or those in the church, should not simply be passive. No, I believe it's very important that people learn this history and understand that crime, education, everything that's going on now has some connection to things in the past. I came about learning these things, doing a lot of reading. The Taylor Branch trilogy is a good place to start for anyone. In terms of Tuscaloosa in general, talking to members of the church, talking to people who are still alive from those days and learning from them. There are several people who work at Stillman now who were active in the protests then. There were people who are members of this church who were alive and participating in those events.
Further intrigued by Reverend Scrivner's mentionings of current Brown Memorial members who are involved with the integration movement, I contacted Mrs. Sheila Holland. Mrs. Holland attended Brown Memorial Presbyterian Church since her childhood and could recall much about the time of Autherine Lucy's initial attempts. As a young adult, Mrs. Holland attended Stillman College, where she interacted with Vivian Malone on numerous occasions and served on the Tigerette dance team with Malone.
There was an organization that was called Westminster Fellowship, and the minister of our church, Reverend Williams, was the leader, and he incorporated students. And he did incorporate her as a member of that organization, and they met on Sunday afternoons here at the church. I remember Autherine Lucy attending the church service one Sunday, and it was sort of like a big deal because we did have Autherine Lucy attending Brown Memorial. And it was sort of special, and everybody wanted you to be on your best behavior, and and we were trying to peep to see what was going on. And several came, she was ushered in, and I'm sure that whomever picked her up or wherever she was living, it was sort of like very secure. It was very tensed.
Wow.
Our neighborhood, where I lived, on the street, the avenue was all white. About 2 blocks on the avenue was all white. So the day that they bombed First African Baptist Church, there was a group of Ku Klux Klan who were all our neighbors, who we all knew. We were sitting on the porch that night, my 2 sisters and I. It was very late, and we looked up, and they were walking in their gowns with their guns on their shoulders. They were going to shoot and kill and do whatever they could do. I don't know if they did or not, but it was just ironic that those are the people that we grew up knowing that my mother and my aunt would all exchange conversations with them. I can't say friends, but...
Following her interview, I was able to talk with Mrs. Holland off camera about the lack of black voices found in media portrayals surrounding the integration efforts. As she insisted that the Tuscaloosa News would never publish black opinions, I asked Mrs. Holland how then the black community managed to remain in communication. To which she replied, the mass meetings. It is quite evident that the Stillman and Brown Memorial community valued strong connections and cooperation in the wake of integration efforts. Having to factor in dangerous safety concerns, community leaders such as Reverend Williams had to make consequential decisions that ensured the best for all involved individuals. Mrs. Holland further informed me that the community's mass meetings were occasionally infiltrated by spies who would report their findings to the involved integrationist employers, who would then fire those accused persons. It is very important that we learn from the past experiences of those who came before us. I believe we need to continue investigating into the certain marginalized historical narratives which have been so wrongly deprived from us.